Council. It's focused on energy dominance.
President Trump taking a number of actions on energy. A newly established National Energy Dominance Council will be led by Interior Secretary Doug Burgum and Energy Secretary Chris Wright. As he signed that executive order, President Trump also directed Burgum to undo former President Biden's executive action last month, banning offshore drilling on 625 million acres of the U.S. ocean. The action may be hard for the Trump administration to undo. It may require Congress to act and change the law, but Burgum is projecting six.
That's Fox's Madeline Rivera. City plans to sue the Trump administration over the secret take-back of more than $80 billion in infrastructure funding.
The legal counsel for the administration sitting there, Eric Adams, issued a letter to City Comptroller Brad Lander on Friday. It states that the city's law department is looking to take legal action by February 21st to recoup $80.5 million in FEMA payments the feds reversed on Tuesday. Lander accusing the president and Doge, led by billionaire Elon Musk, of highway robbery. Musk has claimed massive fraud after Doge discovered a $50 million FEMA payment to the Big Apple was being wasted on luxury hotels in New York City to house illegal migrants. Valentine, Fox News.
So, like South Africa, they support President Trump. Hundreds of protesters on the placards that read, "Thank God for President Trump," displaying other messages claiming they are victims of racism by their own government. African community that were focused on an executive order a week ago which cut aid and assistance to the black-led South African government. I'm Daria. All this.
From Reuters TV, U.S. at 4:48 a.m. today.
After nearly 200 years of mitigating risk, at FM, we can see what others don't. As leaders in commercial property insurance, our risk engineering approach can protect your business in ways others can't. See more at fm.com.
This is Reuters.
Reunited with their families after more than 15 months in captivity. These three Israeli hostages were released by Hamas on Saturday after mediators helped avert a collapse of the fragile ceasefire. In exchange, Israel freed some 369 Palestinian prisoners and detainees who arrived home in buses to cheering crowds. Earlier, the three Israelis were led onto a stage in Khan Yunis, flanked by armed Hamas militants. They were then handed over to the Red Cross to be escorted to Israeli forces. Families watched the live broadcast as the trio was safely released. Many unable to contain their joy at seeing their loved ones again.
We saw him alive and walking on his own feet, and I can't explain. It's so bad. I don't have words for this.
Israeli forces transported the trio back to Israel via helicopter, where they received a hero's welcome. Busloads of Palestinian prisoners then arrived in Ramallah in the West Bank. This man said he had been detained for over 23 years, but that the last year and a half had been the most difficult. The swap allayed growing alarm that the ceasefire agreement could unravel before the end of its first stage. 19 Israeli and 5 Thai hostages have been released so far. 73 are still in captivity, with around half of them declared dead in absentia by Israeli authorities. Prospects for the survival of the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas have been shaken by US President Donald Trump's call for Palestinians to be resettled permanently out of Gaza. Trump has said he wants the tiny enclave to be turned over to the US and redeveloped as a seaside resort. That idea has been rejected out of hand by Palestinian groups, Arab states, and Western allies of Washington.
German Chancellor Olaf Scholz delivered a strong rebuke to J.D. Vance on Saturday after the US Vice President attacked Europe's stance toward hate speech and the far right. Speaking at the Munich Security Conference, Scholz defended German political parties' decision to not work with the far-right Alternative for Germany, or AfD, pointing out its links to Nazism.
Ein Bekenntnis zum Nie wieder ist daher nicht.
A commitment to never again cannot be reconciled with support for the AfD. That's why we will not accept it if outsiders intervene in our democracy, in our elections, and in the democratic formation of opinion in favour of this party. That's just not done, certainly not amongst friends and allies. We resolutely reject this.
The prospect of talks to end Russia's war in Ukraine had been expected to dominate the annual conference after a phone call between the US and Russian presidents this week. But Vance stunned the conference attendees on Friday when he barely mentioned Russia or Ukraine in his speech. Instead, he said the threat to Europe that worried him most was what he called a retreat from the protection of free speech, as well as immigration issues. On Saturday, Scholz drew laughter when he took aim at the lack of comment from Vance on Russia and Ukraine.
Do you think there was anything in the Vice President's speech worth reflecting on?
I mean, all this very relevant as discussions about Ukraine and security in Europe.
Scholz's political rival also joined the chorus of rebukes against Vance on Saturday. German Conservative opposition leader Friedrich Merz pointed to the Trump administration's move to deny certain access to the Associated Press news agency.
We would never kick out a news agency out of the press room of our chancellor.
After nearly 200 years of mitigating risk, at FM, we can see what others don't. As leaders in commercial property insurance, our risk engineering approach can protect your business in ways others can't. See more at fm.com.
The DW News Brief at 4 a.m. today.
This is DW News, and these are our top stories. Donald Trump's Ukraine envoy has said that Vladimir Putin could be forced into making territorial concessions as part of a peace deal with Kyiv. Speaking at the Munich Security Conference, Keith Kellogg suggested that tougher action to cut Moscow's oil revenues could put pressure on Putin. Ukraine's President Vladimir Zelensky has called for the creation of a European army at the Munich Security Conference. He warned that Russia posed a danger to all of Europe. Zelensky said new Russian divisions destined for Belarus could be intended to attack NATO countries. But he also said Russian leader Vladimir Putin is afraid of U.S. President Donald Trump. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, looting has broken out in Bukavu after rebel fighters entered the eastern city's outskirts. Thousands of residents have fled. The Rwandan-backed rebels are already in control of the local airport. The M23 armed group and its allies captured Goma, the region's largest city, late last month. This is DW News from Berlin. There's much more on our news on our website. That's at dw.com.
From BBC News Summary at 4:06 a.m. today.
US Special Envoy has suggested that Europe won't be at the table for any peace talks on ending the war in Ukraine. Keith Kellogg's remarks at the Munich Security Conference will alarm both European leaders and Ukraine's president. Here's the Europe Regional Editor, Dan.
European powers have repeatedly said a settlement of the war in Ukraine needs to be just and durable, stressing it's vital not just for Ukraine's security, but for Europe's too. According to Keith Kellogg, Ukraine will be at the table for any talks by other European allies. President Zelensky has consistently emphasized no decision on Ukraine without Ukraine, but in his speech in Munich earlier, he broadened this out to no decision on Europe without Europe. Perhaps he fears being exposed and pressured in talks between a Donald Trump who appears all too ready to listen to Moscow's conditions and Kiev's arch enemy, Vladimir Putin.
At least 15 people have been killed in the crash of Delhi, the Indian capital's main railway station. A hospital doctor said 3 children with more details, here's Anurasana Tarachi.
Thousands of passengers, many of them traveling on from a huge Hindu religious festival, the Kumbh Mela, have been transiting from Delhi's railway station. It's not clear what triggered the accident. Some platforms reportedly became overcrowded after 2 trains were cancelled. One eyewitness said there was a rush. The Indian Defence Minister, Rajnath Singh, said by the loss of life due to the crash at the Delhi railway station. Dozens of people died at the Kumbh Mela late last month when they were trampled by crowds of pilgrims who had gathered on the riverbanks at Prayagraj in Uttar Pradesh.
Tens of thousands of students and others have converged on the Serbian city of Kragujevac for one of the biggest protests yet linked to the deadly collapse of a train station roof. 15 people died in the disaster last November. This report from our Balkans correspondent, Guy Devani.
Serbia's fourth largest city has been hosting the latest display of anger about last November's deadly roof collapse at Novi Sad railway station. Students marched with banners depicting blood red causing the disaster. The protests prompted last month's resignation of Prime Minister Vučić and 13 people facing criminal charges. The students still demand greater transparency. President Alexander Vučić has been hosting his own State of the Day rally. He told the crowd in Sremska Mitrovica that Serbia is threatened from outside and attacked from the inside.
World News from the BBC. German police say 2 of those hurt when an Afghan man drove a car into a crowd in Munich on Thursday have died of their injuries. They were a 2-year-old girl and her mother. More than 35 other people were injured when the car plowed into a trade union rally. Prosecutors suspect the driver of the car had an Islamist motive. Germans are due to vote in a week's time in an election in which asylum, migration and security will be key themes. Police in Austria say a 14-year-old boy has been killed and 4 other people injured in a knife attack in the city of Villach. They've arrested the suspected attacker, a 23-year-old Syrian. The man accused of a violent residence permit. A police spokesman called it a random attack on passers-by. He said the suspect was then rammed by the driver of a food delivery vehicle. There's been looting and sporadic gunfire in the eastern Congolese city of Bukavu. Abandoned-backed rebels entered on Friday. The streets are said to be largely deserted, apart from young men making off with food stolen from shops and from the UN World Food Programme depot. M23 rebels advanced into Bukavu, weeks after seizing control of Goma, the biggest city in eastern Congo. At an African Union summit, the UN chief Antonio Guterres called for talks.
In DRC, as more cities fall, the risk of a regional war rises. It's time to silence the guns. It's time for diplomacy and dialogue.
The Vatican has confirmed that Pope Francis will not lead this week's traditional Sunday prayer at St. Peter's Square. The Pope, who's 88, was admitted to hospital on Friday to be treated for a respiratory infection. A statement said he'd been told to rest. BBC News.
From the intelligence from The Economist at 7:28 p.m. last Friday.
The Economist. Hello and welcome to The Intelligence from The Economist. I'm Jason Fowler.
And I'm Rosie Blore. Every weekday we provide a fresh perspective on the events shaping your world.
By the numbers, air travel is the safest way to get around. The numbers are set to change. Conflict around the world is closing off airspace more frequently and more randomly, crowding more planes into the highways in the skies.
And anyone who watched its debut in 1975 might not have bet on its longevity. But this show's anarchic counterculturalism has proved extraordinarily popular and resilient. Our correspondent celebrates the 50th birthday of Saturday Night Live. First up, though. US President Donald Trump and India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi have long enjoyed a bromance.
I present to you my friend, India's friend, the President of the United States of America, Mr. Donald Trump.
Namaste.
When the two met at the White House yesterday, Modi matched Trump's Make America Great Again with his own version, Make India Great Again, or MIGA.
MAGA plus MIGA. सब बन जाता है मेगा.
Add MAGA and MIGA together, said Modi, and you get mega prosperity. That all sounds promising. But the path of true love doesn't always run smooth. Just before the two men met, Trump appeared to follow through on a key campaign promise to stamp reciprocal tariffs on goods from every country that taxes American imports.
We're just going to do it the easy way, and we're just going to say whatever you charge, we charge.
India is among the countries that would be hit hardest by those American tariffs. And the two have other thorny issues to deal with, including immigration and defense. So, can love see them through?
India and America are hugely important trading partners. Total trade between the countries has doubled in the last decade to almost $200 billion last year. And American firms employ 1.7 million people in India.
Kira Kuyu is our India correspondent.
Back in the States, America's economy benefits hugely from a 5 million strong Indian American diaspora, among whom 80% have college degrees. That Indian American diaspora has become more and more visible. What we see in general is the increasing political and cultural influence of this diaspora.
So let's take a step back for a minute then, Kira. What was India expecting of Trump's second presidency?
This isn't necessarily new for India last time around. In Trump 1.0, Trump did keep calling India tariff king. And so in some ways, India is better prepared for a potential trade spat than most other US partners. Trump has announced that he will impose reciprocal tariffs on the rest of the world. And so tariffs will look the same from the US side as they will from whoever is imposing them on US products. India has said that it's very open to negotiations on tariffs. Doesn't look like Modi managed to get concessions on that. But what Modi has done in a very shrewd way is he enlisted Indian companies in his commercial charm offensive before the White House visit. And so we've already got Indian promises to buy more American oil, for example. And then we had a sort of newsline-grabbing example very soon after Trump's inauguration, which was the reduction of tariffs on Harley-Davidson motorbikes. And this, for whatever reason, is something that Trump has long been complaining about. So India's been making these conciliatory gestures to avert a trade war.
So before we get to those, Trump and Modi looked pretty friendly last night. How did they get on personally?
It seems that they get on swingingly. That is the official narrative. This is one of the defining bromances of the second Trump presidency. Last time around, there were these mass rallies called Howdy Modi in Austin, Texas, and then Namaste Trump in Underwood, where the two shared a stage. And so there's been an understanding that although there might be bilateral irritants, that mutual understanding, a respect for the other's strongman characteristics will carry to the day.
But you mentioned bilateral irritants, which is a nice diplomatic phrase there. There are some pretty thorny issues they're going to have to deal with, not least on immigration. Is that right?
Yeah, immigration is a vintage Trump concern. It hasn't really hit India so far, and now that's really changing. So we've got both illegal and legal migration that Trump is taking issue with.